What are we discussing on today's Locked on Diamondbacks podcast? How the hell did the D-backs get swept by the Tampa Bay Rays? And is it time to start worrying about our ace, Zac Gallen?
You are Locked on Diamondbacks, your daily Arizona Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked on Diamondbacks podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedonmlb and use code all lowercase locked on MLB for a first deposit match up to $100. I'm your host of this podcast, Millard Thomas. I'm a multimedia journalist and I'm a graphic designer, so please go check out my website, millardthomas24.myportfolio.com. On there, you can see all my latest work, from my packages to my articles to my photos and my graphic design. On today's show, we'll be talking about that disgusting series sweep to Tampa. What is the panic meter for the D-backs' chances to win the NL West? And is it time to worry about our ace, Zac Gallen? Thank you for making Locked on Diamondbacks your first listen every day. I would not be able to do this podcast without you, my loyal listeners, sharing, subscribing, reviewing, doing all that so I could do this podcast for you. Thank you. It's free. It's available on all platforms, so please continue to tell your friends. And one of those platforms is YouTube. Please hit subscribe to Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. We have crossed the 1,200 subscriber threshold. Next goal is 1,300, so please hit subscribe to the Locked on Diamondbacks on YouTube. But now let's get into the podcast and let's discuss that horrendous series sweep to the Tampa Bay Rays, because I just want to get out of Tampa. I know we still got one more series where we got to stay in Florida, but I'm trying to get as far away from Tampa in that stadium as possible, because that was a terrible series loss by the D-backs, who are in the thick of things in the NL West division race, who are fighting for that number one wildcard spot. This was a tough series for the D-backs offense, and even more tough for the series in this series for the D-backs defense, because the D-backs tried their hardest, but the stadium and the turf was just too much for Tampa. I talked about it on a Friday podcast this past week about how I went to the Rays not that long ago. I checked out Tropicana Field and went to a Rays game in late July, and it was by far the least, from a visual perspective, the least desirable ballpark I've ever been to. The concourse feels like you're either in like a basketball high school gymnasium, or it feels like, I don't even know how to describe it. You're literally in the dungeon of the stadium, walk around the concourse. So you just know as a fan walking around the stadium, like, this is not the best thing out there, especially for a professional major league team. And then for the players, I mean, so much bad luck they could attribute to the stadium. Game one, I mean, Gurriel had problems fielding the ball. Jake McCarthy had a trouble picking up the ball as well. You had routine grounders getting hit by the umpire and getting, turned into singles, I guess, for the opposing team. You had balls getting stuck in the roof of the stadium. You had obstruction calls on the net that took away outs for the D-backs defense as well. Like, there were just so many different instances where bad bounces, ball getting stuck, ball hitting something it wasn't supposed to. Like, the D-backs ran into so much bad luck in this series. And yes, the offense wasn't good enough. Yes, the defense could have been better, but this stadium did not help out Arizona at all. And neither did the umpires who were running in front of the ball, who the home plate umpire were just some of the worst balls and strikes I've ever seen before in a series. And so the D-backs were not getting any 50-50 opportunities, which it seems like they've gone so many of the last 6 weeks. It feels like good luck has gone in the D-backs' favor constantly, repeatedly over the last couple of months. And in this series, they got a little shock of reality because luck was not on their side. Also, didn't love the way Zac Gallen and Merrill Kelly pitched. The last two games, we saw Merrill Kelly in the finale, 6 earned runs. Again, still coming back off the injured list, but this was by far the worst Merrill Kelly we've seen this season. Tampa Bay Rays hitters were just teeing off Merrill Kelly. A lot of extra hard contact and extra base hits. Zac Gallen himself did not have the best start either. He went 5 innings, 4 earned runs. He gave up 9 hits as well. The only guy in the series who looked good as a starting pitcher was, of course, the guy who's been the best D-back starter for 2 months now. Ryan Nelson did a great job of shutting down the Rays team, but unfortunately, the offense didn't come through enough for the D-backs in that game until the final inning where Corbin Carroll hit a game-tying home run in the ninth, but then the D-backs couldn't do anything in the bottom of the ninth, as we also saw some bad defense in the stadium not helping out the D-backs. Overall, the defense was bad in the series. Gallen and Merrill Kelly were not the best in this series. The offense was not the best. Also, I didn't love Torey Lovell in this series. Like, why is Ketel Marte continuing to play if he's not fully healthy? Like, he cannot, he can't even go out there and swing a bat. Like, after one pitch trying to take a swing, he's already down on the ground. He's grimacing. He can barely walk off the field. Like, this is a guy who was coming for Ohtani for MVP. Ohtani was definitely still going to win it, but Marte was right there, second best MVP go-getter in the National League. According to the FanDuel odds, like, he was running away with second place in the MVP voting. Now with Marte, it's like, can we just make sure we get this guy healthy for the postseason? Can we just make sure we don't compromise him any further? If he's not 100% healthy, how can he be out there? Like, if he can't even last through one pitch of an at-bat, how did he get cleared to go back out there and swing at major league pitching? Like, what did the D-backs see where they're like, yeah, he's good enough to go out there? Like, he couldn't even survive one pitch. So how did the D-backs even evaluate Marte to the point where they deemed him healthy enough to go in that game today? Absolutely insane stuff for a team who is trying to win the World Series to treat their best player. You just don't do that. Like, especially with like the way basketball has gone the last few years, right? We've talked so much about load management. And it's because the players feel like the teams don't put their players in the best positions in terms of health. Same with the NFL. Like, there's been such a recall in those two sports the last few years where it's like, are we sure you guys are always looking out for your athletes' best interest in terms of their health? Well, with Major League Baseball and the D-backs, it clearly does not seem that way with how the D-backs are treating Ketel Marte, and they need to do a better job. Torey also needs to do a better job of getting your best players at bats, like a Jock Peterson. We know you want to use him in platoon situations, but when you're down Moreno, Walker, and Ketel Marte, you have to get Jocks. You have to get Jock Peterson's bat in the lineup more, and they just did not do that enough. D-backs offense also not good in extra innings in the finale, which was really disappointing to see. Could not get that runner over from second base repeatedly, and just very disappointing after getting that clutch home run by Adrian Del Castillo in the ninth, because he only hits home runs when it's to tie or win the game. His first career home run was, of course, not that long ago when he had the walk-off hit. Now we got Del Castillo with the big game-tying 3-run shot in this game. Unfortunately, it was wasted. Corbin Carroll also had himself another home run. His home runs, I think, in now 4 of his last 5 games. I think 5 of his last 8 overall, and 8 home runs since the All-Star break. Like, Carroll has been on a tear from a power perspective, and we love to see it. Bad vibes overall from this series. D-backs need to just wipe away their memories. You ever seen what is it called? Men in Black with Will Smith, and how they have the little thing that just wipes away your memory when you click flash. That's what the D-backs need to do with this series. Just erase it from your memory because it was terrible. So many things went bad. Let's move on and let's look forward to the Miami Marlins as we'll discuss the panic meter for the D-back chances to win the NL West in segment number 2. You've heard us talk about FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. And of course, my favorite thing to do on FanDuel is the same game parlay. Give me the D-backs money line, give me Jake McCarthy over on total bases, and give me Brendan Pfaadt over on strikeouts. When that three-leg hits, it brings a big smile to my face. And if you want a big smile on your face, just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. All right. Let's get back into the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. And, typically on the Sunday show or, whatever the first podcast of the week is, whether you get it Sunday or Monday, we've done the last couple months a little panic meter. It's kind of been retired the last couple weeks because typically the panic meter was for the D-backs season where it's like the D-backs are struggling. It was for whether or not we really believe the D-backs were going to make it to the playoffs. At one point, the panic meter was like a 9 because the D-backs were a bunch of games below 500. Around the All-Star break, the panic meter was around a 4 or 5 because they were right on the cusp of that third wild card spot. And then all of a sudden we moved the panic meter down to like a 3 right after the All-Star break. We haven't done it the last few weeks because it's been pseudo retired because the D-backs have become the hottest team in baseball. So there hasn't been a lot of need to panic. You haven't really needed a panic meter because the D-backs have turned around their season. They've been the best team in baseball since June 1st. Yes, they're coming off a sweep, but they've still had the best offense in baseball the last couple months. They're up there in home runs. The pitching ERA has been good. Like every stat category, offense and pitching has been incredible for the D-backs the last couple months. So from a panic meter perspective, like I'm all the way in on the D-backs potentially getting back to the World Series and winning it. I think the D-backs are a true contender, and I have a lot of faith in this team making some noise in the postseason. And so now I want to recalibrate the panic meter and not look at it as a panic meter, but more of a belief meter, or it could use as a panic meter, but for the odds of the D-backs but winning the NL West. So now we're going to turn it into a belief meter. The belief that we have the D-backs are going to win the NL West division. And right now I have the belief meter at a 4. And I have it as a 4 because that's how many games the D-backs are currently within the Dodgers. They are 4 games within the Dodgers, and that's still not that bad considering the D-backs just got swept. I think we should be pretty happy that it's only a 4-game lead for LA. And actually, let me check in on the San Diego Padres as well. Yeah, the Padres just lost to the Rockies. So D-backs 4 games back of the Dodgers for the division lead, and only a game back of the Padres. Only a game back of the Padres for second place in the NL West. So despite getting swept by Tampa, not terrible for the standings in the NL West. So I have the belief meter at a 4 right now for the D-backs. I'm not saying I'm super confident in the team right now. The 4 is like a representative of a If it was at a 10 on the belief scale, that means I totally believe the D-backs are going to win the NL West. They probably have a 3-game lead on the Dodgers or Padres or something. But right now, being 4 games back of the Dodgers, playing really good baseball, but coming off the sweep, I'll put the D-backs at a 4 because right now I feel on the D-backs' chances of winning the NL West. The D-backs are still within 4 games of the Dodgers, only a game back of the Padres, so it looks really good in the standings right now. And coming up for the D-backs, you look at their next 2 series, and you get some more vulnerable opponents, which is very good for Arizona. You get to face Miami, who is not a good team at all. And you also get to face the Boston Red Sox, who are struggling a little bit. Since the All-Star break, the Marlins have the 19th best record in Major League Baseball, while the Red Sox have the 20th best record. The Marlins, you look at their rotation, a lot of injuries right now. Of course, Sandy Alcantara hasn't been there the whole year, but even guys like Sixto Sanchez and some other guys they have that traded away the Trevor Rogers of the world. Like, it's a skeleton crew right now for the Marlins in their rotation. And of course, they've also traded away half their roster this past deadline as well. D-backs actually benefited from some of the selling that the Marlins did by acquiring AJ Puck and Josh Bell. So D-backs get to face the Marlins next, who are right now not trying to win games, right? With the amount of injuries that they've had, with the amount of talent that they've already sold, this is a team that's definitely looking forward to the draft next season and securing a top draft pick. And so if you're Arizona, The Marlins still have some talent on their team, especially as you're going to see an Edward Cabrera in this upcoming series, who's a very good young starting pitcher ascending in Major League Baseball. But overall, this Marlins team is vulnerable and should be a team that the D-backs take advantage of. Also, the D-backs, well, we're not going to talk too much about the Red Sox right now. We'll talk about that series later this week, Thursday, as the D-backs have an off day, but that should be another series that the D-backs potentially win. Then you look at the next two series for the Dodgers and Padres. Dodgers play Seattle, and then they play Tampa Bay next. You can only hope the Mariners, who still have something to play for, can show up in that series against LA. The Mariners are still in the thick of things in the AL West. They are currently 4 games back of the Astros, and it's kind of like their best path to making it to the postseason because they're 5.5 games back in the wild card. But what do I think is more likely for the Mariners? Are they more likely to catch the Kansas City Royals, who have a plus 109 run differential, best in the wild card between either league? Or do they have a better chance of catching the Houston Astros, who are plus 70 in the division right now when you look at their run differential, and they're only 4 games back of the Astros? So I think Seattle definitely has a lot to play for, and they're probably looking at the division as their best opportunity to make it to the postseason. So you need to win games against the Dodgers. Then the Dodgers are lucky that they don't have to travel to Tampa Bay. They don't have to deal with that awful stadium. The Rays are traveling to LA, but maybe the Rays want a little bit of revenge for that 2020 World Series, so maybe they'll be playing for a little something. And then for the Padres, they got the Twins and the Mets up next. Those are two very feisty teams that shouldn't be easy to take down at all. The Mets are still vying for that third wild card spot, and the Twins are a very good team in the American League. I still believe the D-backs can take the NL West, but I just don't think it's super likely. That's why I got the belief meter at a 4. I just think the path for the Dodgers to win the division is very likely. At this point, I care more about the D-backs getting the top seed in the wild card and making the Padres come to Arizona in the wild card round. That is what I'm focused on most of all. But if you have any belief in the D-backs winning the NL West, then why not go to FanDuel and place a little wager down, because the D-backs are currently plus 1,000 on FanDuel to win the NL West. So if you believe the D-backs can do it, you can get a nice little return on your wager if you go to FanDuel Sportsbook. Now, I want to talk to you guys about whether or not it's time to worry about Zac Gallen in segment number 3. But hey, if you're looking to get into daily fantasy sports, then I suggest playing Prize Picks, because Prize Picks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stats projections and watch the winnings roll in. Get in on the daily action with your friends and become part of the Prize Picks community today. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks is available in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, run your game. All right. Let's get back to the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. And let's discuss if it's time for the D-backs to worry about their star pitcher, Zac Gallen, because just from the eye test, I have not been super impressed with Zac Gallen this season, and this most recent start just laid down more of the concern that I've had for Gallen this season. And I want to ask you guys, because I always like to ask the audience, are you guys worried about Zac Gallen? Because I am. I think he has been pretty up and down this year, despite having a pretty good ERA for most of the season. I have not tended to believe the ERA as much. for Zac Gallen this season, it's been more about the eye test versus the stats. And the stats tell you he's actually been pretty good this year. The ERA at times has been pretty nice for Zac Gallen. He has put together a couple nice stretches where he has given up a lot of earned runs. But overall, I have not felt that level of dominance from Zac Gallen this year. I have not seen Gallen with a capital G. Feel like he's been a little bit up and down this season. I feel like he's given up a lot of contact. I feel like he's not really fooling anybody. And I'm just a little bit worried and concerned about the D-back star pitcher because coming off the season he had last year, I think he showed a little bit of concern. And so far, with how he's pitched this season, I don't know if I've been alleviated of the concerns I've had for Zac Gallen at all. Now, some say Zac Gallen is fine. There's nothing to worry about. The only reason he struggled at all this year is due to the fact that he's been in and out the lineup with injuries. He hasn't been able to really get into a rhythm. He still needs to build up the strength in the areas he got hurt. I do agree with that sentiment to a point because I definitely believe if Zac Gallen never got hurt this season, we probably would see a higher ceiling from him this year. He probably would be a little bit more consistent game to game. But also, injuries are part of the reason why I'm a little worried with Zac Gallen because if he's already been in and out the lineup with multiple injuries this year, with hamstring and cramping and groin, it's just one thing or another. Will this just be one of those seasons where he just marred and injury riddled and he just faces poor injury luck? Because there are times where players just deal with that for a whole season where it's just a soft tissue injury with a hamstring that continually pops up, or maybe you just have, you rolled your ankle and it was never able to heal for the rest of the season. Like sometimes a player just has to deal with lingering issues and injuries for the course of a season. And maybe this is just one of those years where Zac Gallen has to deal with some health issues. And we've seen him, have a season like this before. Back in 2021, it was a season where Zac Gallen dealt with a ton of injuries. He only made 23 starts, 121 innings pitched because of those injuries. And it kind of led to the same kind of season he's having now, where he gave up a lot of hits. The whip wasn't that good. He gave up a lot of walks as well. He finished the season with a 4.3 ERA. And overall, we just didn't see that level of dominance that we're accustomed to seeing from Zac Gallen. I believe Zac Gallen could just be one of those guys where if he's just a little bit off, if he just has a couple of knickknacks, it just really affects his game. Maybe we've seen this happen with other athletes at times where there are some dudes who it doesn't matter if they have a broken leg. It doesn't matter if, they have plantar fasciitis or whatever the injury may be. They can just play through it and give you still 90% of their ceiling of their potential. But there are some other guys where they're just a little bit off. It affects their whole game, and they are just not the same guy when they're compromised as opposed to when they're fully healthy. I think Zac Gallen could be one of those guys where if he's not 100% healthy, he just can't give you the same level of dominance that we're accustomed to seeing as D-backs fans. And, injuries are part of the game, and you want your players to be fully healthy. And if Zac Gallen is not fully healthy, maybe the D-backs should consider giving him a little bit more rest. Maybe just like a Ketel Marte, maybe he needs to be 100% fully healthy before he goes out there. Not saying Zac Gallen has to go on the injury list or anything, but maybe do you skip a start for Zac Gallen to make sure he's fully healthy? I'm not sure, but right now he doesn't look right. And one of the other reasons why I'm a little bit concerned with Zac Gallen is because of what I mentioned earlier. In the second half last season, we saw Zac Gallen not exactly look fantastic, right? The second half of the year, post All-Star break, it was not the same Zac Gallen that we're accustomed to seeing. And now I look at this season, 2024, and it's like, is what we saw in the second half last year, did that bleed into this season? I don't know. I don't know what happened to Zac Gallen in the second half of last year, but so far in 2024, he's not as bad as he was in the second half last year, but I get a similar vibe. When you look at the stats for Zac Gallen, one thing that's pretty glaring is the numbers against his fastball. This season, he's allowing a 318 average and a 503 slugging against his fastball. That is very bad for Zac Gallen standards. Last year, it was a 238 average and a 360 slugging allowed on his fastball. And so the numbers have gone in the wrong direction. And actually, even if you look at his fastball numbers last year in the second half, the numbers started trending in the wrong direction. So I think for Zac Gallen, getting that fastball back in order is step number one to him reestablishing himself as an elite level pitcher. His fastball has been his go-to pitch throughout his career. Right now, he is not throwing it effectively. The velo is still there for Zac Gallen. The velo just where it's been. The velo is the same as what it's been last year, and the same that's been the last couple years. But the stats are telling you he's given up a lot of hard contact and quality contact against his fastball right now. He's not fooling hitters. He's walking people at a way higher rate than he's typically used to. This is just not the clean Zac Gallen that we've seen throughout his major league career. We've seen Zac Gallen have stretches and runs of dominance. And there was a time this past May where he had 4 quality starts before getting hurt. And so maybe we would have seen Zac Gallen go on a run this season if he never got hurt. But I can't help but feel that maybe there is a little bit of concern that we should have with Zac Gallen. He had the struggles in the second half last year, and so far this year from the eye test, I just don't think he's been that clean. I don't think he's been that locked in. Maybe it's because of injuries. Maybe it's not. I know the fastball hasn't been up to par. So for Zac Gallen, let's see if he can work on that pitch, get the numbers back in order to where they've been the last couple years. And if that fixes all his problems, then I will feel fine about Zac Gallen entering the postseason. Now, that's it for this edition of the Locked On Diamondbacks podcast. Come back tomorrow for more Diamondbacks news coverage and insight. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Doses.